Welcome back to the Foundations of Learning podcast. I'm your host, Shali Flint. Today, I talked to David, founder of Changemaker Education. He is challenging the way that we think about education, school, and learning by helping educators and parents start their own microschools. We talk about the education system and the problems within it, and it could potentially change the way that you think about public education, private schools, charter schools, and so much more. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Foundations of Learning podcast. I hope to inspire you to actively participate in your child's learning journey, fostering a love for knowledge and nurturing the skills necessary for success in a rapidly changing world. I am actually very excited to have you on today, David, because you are doing something that I think is important in education with microschools and starting the program that you have with microschools. And so I just want to kind of go into your background a little bit in education and what inspired you to even get into education.
Yeah, I always like to start by saying that I was a banker turned educator turned entrepreneur. So that's the easiest way to describe it. I started right out of college. I had a job teaching part-time Spanish because, you didn't need a certification. And then I was like, wow, middle school, I was like, this is the most difficult thing I've ever done. So I ran away, as you know, I ran away and was like, okay, I'm just going to go into the corporate world. And so I ended up getting this great job, moving to Washington, D.C., and I was a corporate banker. And then I turned 30 after, several years in the bank. And I was like, this is not my life. This is not the life I want. Like I looked forward 20 years. And I'm like, this is not what I want for me. I want to impact the community. I was like tutoring Ethiopian immigrants at night and coaching basketball. And that's where all the joy came, right? And then I was just dying inside it every day at the bank. So I left and I became a teacher and started teaching in urban schools in Oakland, California. So I literally went from corporate banking to urban schools. That was interesting, super fun. And I fell in love with the kids and I fell in love with teaching. And then I found this great charter school organization that was just starting. We were starting one small school at the back of a big high school campus. And we ended up growing that organization to 10 schools across the 10 years I was there. I went from teacher to principal to assistant superintendent. And I was just super inspired by what's possible when you get a great group of educators together with a big vision. And we ended up taking that model into 300 schools across the country now today. And so when that was over, I was really tired because that was a lot in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I decided to go and start when my kids are really little, I decided to go and start my own charter school to not have that kind of lifestyle of, driving and talking and coaching 10 different principals and all that craziness and just going back to the community. And so I started a K-8 charter school in Sacramento here where I live and ended up passing that on to our founding principal. And now I have launched Changemaker Education, which also known as Changemaker Microschools, which is an organization that helps empower and support others to open their own microschools. And then as a network, we stay together and support each other for years to come. So super exciting to be doing the microschool work now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what's interesting to me is I've had quite a few guests on my podcast now, and a lot of people that they actually don't start in education. They go into education and then they kind of morph out of education or not out of education, but like public education, like what we know of education, right? And go and pursue something different, which I just find it so interesting because obviously like I went to school to become an educator. I have a degree in early childhood education and I taught for several years. And I obviously decided to leave my teaching job ultimately because I wanted to be home with my daughter. And there was just so many problems within the education system that I was like, I can't fix this, and it's overwhelming. It's exhausting. I want to give all to my child, and her endeavors and things like that. And so, like I had, left. But what's interesting, like I said, is I feel like there are so many people that don't even start out in education, get into education, and then you guys are like the ones that are changing things, and like us teachers are just like staying in the system, just like we're gonna keep being a cog in the system.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. And I do think my time as a banker was really instructive. Like when I first got into the Oakland public school system, I just couldn't even understand what the heck was going on. I'm like, this is the most backward system I've ever seen in my life. Like in terms of just the way they treated adults, the way teachers weren't trusted. The teachers were treated like the bottom of the system, even though they're, professionals. It was just so bizarre to me. And I loved the kids, and that's what kept me in it. I think that's what keeps most of us in it. But it's just such
Mm-hmm.
a sad state of affairs. And it's only the really sad thing is it's only gotten worse. I started 25 years ago. And so it's only gotten worse in terms of how we treat teachers, how we treat kids, parents, just the whole system has just gotten worse. And so I'm excited to be trying to build something new because I know there's amazing educators out there like yourself and probably people listening that have great ideas and that want to do what's best for kids and that just want to get out of all the red tape and all the politics and all the silliness and actually create really amazing experiences for kids, which is why they got into education in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's why I got into education. I love children. I love teaching. I love seeing them learn new things
Yeah.
and like being so excited about when they do learn something new and they, are so proud of themselves and all of that. But it was like all of the red tape, all of the bureaucracy and everything else that went along with teaching that was so exhausting that I was like, this is not sustainable. I can't do this. And obviously my first year of teaching, well, you don't know this, but the first year of my teaching was during COVID. So
Oh,
I
wow.
like really got thrown into this like mess, that was education at that time. And then even like years past and everything, like we were still dealing with those types of things that it was like, it was exhausting. And I could see, even though like I was, that was my first year was 2020. And within that, I also, I saw what the school system was before COVID and then I saw what it was after COVID. And I really do feel like it affected the kids even more. And I was teaching elementary school. So
Yeah.
like I could see, and like the littles, I was teaching first grade and I could
Yeah.
see like the anxiety that had come with it. I could see just so many different things that were happening with the kids. I saw like years later, I saw
Yeah.
a lot of speech issues, like more than I had seen previous. And I was asking other educators that had been in the field, like you for quite some time. And I was like, is this normal to have this many speech problems, and we're talking really simple, like articulation issues,
Yeah.
not, anything that's like super drastic. And so then I started doing my own research and I was like, okay, the masks were actually affecting the way that the kids were learning to read,
Oh,
or not
right.
even learning to read, but speak. And then it
Speak.
was
Yeah.
making it harder for them to learn to read because the
Yep.
articulation issues and like everything was compounding. And so I just thought it was so interesting, but it was like something that I knew I couldn't fix. Like I just
Yep.
was like stuck and I was doing everything I could. And then I was exhausted because you don't get much support as a teacher. And like you said,
No.
it's this weird top down and the teachers are the most important part. The teachers, the
Absolutely.
paraprofessionals, the aides, all of these people,
Yeah.
like ground on your boots on the ground, like
Yeah.
they are the most important. And if they were gone, everything would just crumble. But that's not how
Absolutely.
it goes. It's like
No.
you're not really not that you're not important, but we don't really care about you is how I felt as an educator.
That's a very common story. Everything you just said is very common and very sad. And I think what happened during the pandemic was my kids were in second and fourth grade and being, working in high schools and middle schools for years and then having my own elementary school, I was shocked and appalled at what actually was happening on Zoom school. Like, I'm like, wow, they are doing 1 hour of the teacher talking at them and then they're have nothing else to do the whole entire day. And I'm like, not once was there like a breakout group, not once was there like a creative activity that maybe the parents could have done with kids. So this is not to throw teachers under the bus because like you said, I know they're having a hard time, but the fact that nobody, like an administrator or anybody, just thought, could we do something other than just talk at them for an hour? So I think what it did is it gave a window into parents to see what actually is going on at school. And a lot of my homeschool friends will talk about how it's really only 2 hours a day that you need to do academic instruction in a school. And the other 4 to 6 hours are just crowd control and behavior management and all these other things that are going on. And so I think parents started to see like, wait, what are we doing here? Like, what are our tax dollars paying for? Then you send them to a private school and you're like, oh, it's a little bit better of the same thing. It's like the class sizes are a little smaller, but it's still a sort of top down, teacher at the front, everybody sit still and listen model. That's the prevailing model. And so I just think parents started saying, this is something's wrong here. And then you saw just billions of dollars being poured into education. and nothing actually changing. So whether your politics are, you're kind of like, I don't understand what we're doing anymore. And so as a result of that, the microschools movement was really just going crazy. Like I get so much interest for this program that I'm doing because there's so many people that are like, we're tired of it. Parents, teachers, and the students that are just like, what are we
Mm-hmm.
doing? And so what you saw is, I think parents starting to get really frustrated with what was going on. And so these like little pods, now they're turning into these micro schools. And it's really, really exciting to see what's happening because people are taking back their power and you're finding great teachers that are like, I'm going to start a micro school with 15 kids, at
Mm-hmm.
a church, to partner with a church, or in my living room with 5 kids. And they're having amazing success. And a lot of times they're not even professional educators. That's an interesting story too. It's like a mom
Mm-hmm.
who's like, well, I've kind of done some homeschooling, but if you personalize the instruction and you actually meet the kid where they're at and work with the parents and give the kid what they need, you don't even have to be a trained educator, which a lot of us don't like to hear, but it's actually true. So
No,
it's been
100%. It's
fascinating.
true. Yeah, and it is like you said, like okay, it's us talking to the kids, and it was honestly it was really crazy because we had been told, at least in my district, I
Yeah.
taught in Utah, northern
Okay.
Utah, and I basically got an email that was like, hey, there's this thing called COVID going on. We don't really know like how it's affecting people. We're probably going to end school early this year, but we don't know. And then literally like the next day, it was like your kids aren't coming back. And it was like, okay. And like we had sent them home. Like we literally got an email, we sent them home, and they said, kids aren't coming back. Like you need to you have 1 week to figure out how to do school online. And there was like no training. And it
Yep.
was just like you're going to use Canva or not Canva, my goodness, Canvas, and
Canvas.
you're
Oh yeah.
going to we're going to use Canvas for first graders, and you have to figure out how to make it work with them. And it was just so much, and especially as a first year teacher, I'm like, I don't even know what is
Exactly.
happening right now because as a first year teacher, you're learning so much already, and then you're
Exactly.
thrown into that. And so I definitely don't like. I will say, I think that it was just a hot mess express for everybody.
Yes.
And I don't want to blame educators either. But at the same point that you said, like in education, it really is classroom management. Like that's the biggest thing is you're
Yep.
managing children for most of the day and then
Yep.
teaching just a little bit of the day. And
Yes.
so when you're trying to do this via Zoom, it's really hard for with first graders, especially if you don't know what
Of
you're doing.
course.
And so
Yeah.
then it's like you're trying to like emulate what you were already taught in your education
Yes.
program, but
Yes.
it's not cohesive with
No.
online teaching,
Yep.
and you have to be like do it so differently. And so yeah, it was definitely a shock. And that is one thing that I try to pound into parents' brains is that you don't have to be a trained educator to teach your children, especially in today's day and age. Like we have the internet and you can literally learn how to do anything that you want to do. I mean, with AI now, you can
Oh,
ask,
yeah.
a robot and say,
Hmm.
how do I teach my child to read? And it can break it down
Yep.
for you. I've done it because
Absolutely.
I'm like, how accurate is it on how to teach a
Yeah.
child to read? And it's pretty dang accurate. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
gonna give you really what you need. And so you don't need to be a trained educator. It definitely doesn't take 8 hours of the day or 7 hours, six
No.
hours, whatever, to teach a child. It's just that you are managing so many children. All the
Yep.
children are at differing levels, but you're giving them that grade level information or skills, and then trying to catch those that are behind up in small group, and then trying to
Yep.
challenge those that are ahead in small group. But you get like literally in my day for first grade, we did maybe an hour max of like, okay, you're getting what you need, and that is
Right.
it.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so
Yep.
I think that's something that parents don't understand either, is that when you're teaching one on one, you're at their level, you're moving at the pace
Yep.
that they need. It changes how they're learning, how quickly
Everything.
they're learning. It
Yep.
changes everything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, for you, what were some of the pivotal moments that really led you to believe that our current education system wasn't working? I know you kind of briefly went over it, but what was like your big aha, like, okay, this isn't working? Help your child become a confident reader with letters and sounds. This structured curriculum includes lesson plans, games, and multisensory activities to make learning letters fun and effective. Get started today at k3homeschoolfoundations.com or check out the link down below.
My whole life. Meaning, like, I actually went through, I grew up in a suburban area where my parents didn't have a lot of money, but they were good at finding like the best schools. They would like live on the right outside of the district boundary, like in an apartment, but we would be able to go to the best schools. But anyway, so I got the best version of the traditional education, which was not good for me. Like I'm very smart. And so I was able to like just do everything in 5 minutes and just sit there. And it wasn't good for me at all. And it was the best version. It wasn't like a dysfunctional urban school or an under-resourced rural school. It was like the best version of suburban public education. And it was so underwhelming. And that's one of the reasons why I left the classroom when I first started going back to teaching after college. Because I was like, oh, this is more of what I experienced. It's just not good. And, so for me, when I went into Oakland and started teaching there, and then I saw, oh, wow, this is like my suburban school, but 100 times worse because the kids have so many more needs and the adults are not happy. And it's a culture of mediocrity. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then I found this charter organization, and we talked about like, how can we do this differently, right? And so I spent a lot of years doing that, and then I built another charter school that was trying to do it differently. And so for me, it's been my whole education career, like, the system's not broken. The system was designed to do exactly what it's doing. It's to create factory model. It was, built in 1880. It's a factory model system. You're just putting kids on a conveyor belt, and it gets worse when they get to middle school and high school. Let me tell you, like, elementary school, it's kind of hidden a little bit better because you at least have 25, 30 kids in a class and one adult. But then you go into the conveyor belt of 180 kids in middle school. My daughter's 11 years old. She's in sixth grade in a middle school with, 400 kids in her grade, 40 kids in a class. The teachers have 180 kids. If they know their names, they're lucky. I asked her, is there a trusted adult you could talk to? Like, I know the research on like one trusted adult for adolescents at your school. She looked at me and started laughing. She's like, are you kidding me? No, there's not even remotely one person I feel like I could talk to. So that's the system. And so for me, it's all the experiences I had. I went to community college to make up for the fact that I really didn't learn anything in high school. And I actually enjoyed learning when I went to community college. And so it's like, so I've been trying to figure out how to disrupt and change the system my whole entire career. And I feel like microschools are an exciting moment because, like you said, you're shrinking the problem on so many levels. You're getting outside of the system. Now you're saying there's 10, 15 kids per teacher. You're bringing parents into the conversation. You're not trying to push them away, which is what the traditional public schools do, and traditional schools in general. Just push the parent away, give them what they want. If they're obnoxious, ignore them. Maybe they get on the PTA, but you're not partnering with the people that know the kids best. And so, for me, it's every experience I've ever had. I did consulting after I left my last charter school, and I just I can't even do this because I go into a supposedly, really good school and I see all the massive problems, and I'm like, there's a root issue here. There's a root issue that you have to change the operating system. You have to stop having classes with 35 kids, teachers that are trying to do their best, but they can't deal with the system. You got to change that, and don't hire me to try and change anything because I'm not going to be able to help you. So I was like, I can't even be a consultant because I felt disingenuous. And so to answer your question, my whole entire life.
No, I love it. And I think you hit a lot of important points. And it is kind of funny because I do talk about, my experiences in education on my social media. And I talk about how, like you said, like our schools literally were created to create factory workers. Like that was the main goal of the public education system. And that really, I didn't even really think about it, honestly, until I had read, the Underground History of American Education by, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the author's name right now. But anyways, I read that book, and it was like so eye-opening, and he started to really talk about these people that created the public education system, what their goals were, and they were just outright saying it. And there was, some parents that were trying to fight back on this and didn't want to send their kids to public school, but the government basically said, like, no, you have to send them to school. And that is kind of the case now too, right? Like we have laws that you have to send your child to school, or you have to show documentation that you're educating them in some way. And I do think it's important that we educate kids kids for
Yeah, of
sure.
course.
But yeah, I mean, this factory model, like I get told on social media that I'm a crazy person and that that's not true. And like, how dare you say these things? And I'm like, no, but it is true. Like, if you actually look at the history, that is what it's made to do. And if you really dig into it and look at what it is, and then you're immersed in it, you're like, yeah, nothing really has changed in
Yeah.
that. I mean, we might do some things that make it look like it's changed, but it hasn't. And
Yep.
the weirdest part for me is as I've been kind of, going back into my college days and what I learned in education programs, and a
Yeah.
lot of it really is I don't know, the best way to describe it is how to manipulate kids into doing what you want them to do
Hmm.
when you want them to do
Yep.
it, and less on how to teach a kid to read, how to teach them, math and writing and all of these things. Yes, I learned that, but unfortunately, I also didn't learn the best ways. They were kind of outdated strategies, and now I've learned better ways. And since I've learned better ways, I've seen it help kids tremendously, and the old ways were just complete trash. But
Yeah.
yeah, like when I look back at my education degree, I'm like, what did I even like go to school for besides how to manage kids and how to manipulate them into doing what I want them to do? And so as I was, going through all of this and I'm still teaching, I was like, oh, I'm like disgusted by myself on like
Yeah.
how I know this is not developmentally appropriate for these kids, and I just feel like I'm manipulating them all the time. And it was just, yeah, it was kind of like a weird aha moment for me as well when I was actually immersed in it.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, and I remember reading. I didn't read that book you referred to, but I remember reading a book about like Maria Montessori and Horace Mann, and it's like if I always joke like if they had put Maria Montessori and Horace Mann in a boxing ring and she had won boxing, like then we would have a completely different education system because Montessori
Mm-hmm.
education believes that like the child has so much to give and they're curious and they should be self-directing and they should negotiate conflicts on their own and like takes the adults out of it. The adult's the
Mm-hmm.
observer, and you'll see
Mm-hmm.
that in like Waldorf and some of these more popular, like we all know these, we've heard these alternative education models.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the system that we have is like they're empty vessels. Your job is to literally pour information into them and they can't think for themselves, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's the operating system that we have to change is not like you said, not changing things on the side. Like I see a lot of quote unquote innovation in education and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not really innovating much, you're just kind of like doing a different curriculum. But we need to change the
Yep.
actual root issue, which is that we don't believe kids can do anything, we don't believe kids deserve to think for themselves, we don't. And there's teachers that are doing this in spite of the system, right? There's these amazing teachers. We can all think about our education, whether it was private or public, and there's at least one that we're like, wow, that person was amazing. And they're doing it in spite of the system, not because of the system. So let's create a system where they can do it as part of the system, which is what I love about the microschools we're creating, because we're
Mm-hmm.
like, if you believe that children are amazing, they have inherent genius, and you can set up an environment for them where that's all you're doing is trying to figure out what can we do to bring out the best version of you, and then how do we ensure that you get what you need, like amazing things will happen. And I saw this in my charter schools for years. Like the kids that had IEPs that were special education students that would come into middle school and high school, well, we had to go back to the district to get approved from the school board. They would
Mm-hmm.
be the first ones that would want to speak to the school board. They're like, let me tell this school board about how their schools are terrible. That's what they would do. They'd be like, I
Mm-hmm.
went through your school for K through 5 or K through 8, and nobody ever believed in me. They all just put me in a separate room. They said that I was special this and special that, and they held me to low expectations. The moment I arrived at this school, these people told me I could do great things, and now I have my own business, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, or I didn't think I could do a speech in front of the whole school. Like they had these powerful stories to share. Like if you believe in kids and you believe that they can do amazing things, they will do that. But unless there's a teacher that's doing that for you, the current system doesn't support that.
100%. And I love that you brought up Horace Mann because he's like the father of our education system. And I was so nerding out last summer and I actually read his school journal. And this guy was
Oh,
like legit crazy. Like he had like this journal of like sending it to educators because he obviously was in, I'm trying to think the first state that had public education. I want to say it was like Massachusetts or something.
Massachusetts. I was
Yeah, it was
thinking that too.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like where he was essentially. And he had like a newsletter essentially that he would send to educators. And I was reading this and I was just thinking to myself, like, how is this man the father of our education system? I mean, it makes sense because I understand the history of it, but also
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is crazy. And like you said, there's so many different models like Montessori and Waldorf, and people are creating nature schools, which are kind of, I
Yeah.
would say, almost like a micro school, right? Because in
Yeah.
micro schools, you really can teach however you please and create an environment that you want to create. And a lot of people will tell me too, they'll be like, just go into the classroom and do these models in the classroom. And I just giggle at myself because I'm like, I can't. Like, if as
Yeah.
much as I would love
It's
to,
not
because
possible.
I've
Yeah.
learned, on my own, I've read different books with these different philosophies, and I think they're amazing. And I'm going to homeschool my daughter, and I plan on, kind of integrating a lot of these models within my homeschool with my daughter and then my
Yeah.
other
It's
future
great.
children. And I'm like, you just can't really do it in the classroom. It just, the logistics of it just doesn't work. You have way too many kids, and it's just the way it is. And, you have to follow a schedule that the school
Yep.
gives you as well. And a lot of schools are crazy, and they're like, every first grade teacher must be teaching reading
Yep.
at 10:30. And if you're
Yep.
behind, like it's the weirdest thing. And it's like, who cares if I am like 10 minutes late or whatever, and I would always feel so, so guilty when I was like, hey, these kids just need playtime. I know we've had recess,
Right.
but I can see it. They need to play. They need to have just undirected play. And I had all kinds of different dramatic play stuff within my classroom. And I just let them
Right.
go ham for 15 minutes. And if somebody walked in, like my instructional coach or my principal, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get in so much trouble
Right. Right.
because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing at that
Yes.
time. But I could just see these kids need it. And the amount of learning that just happens when you just let the kids play, like
Oh.
they were doing math, they were writing on their
Yep.
own because they like
Yep.
set up this whole grocery store, and they were
I
like
believe
doing
it.
math, and they're like, this is $5 and this is $7, so you owe me this or whatever, right? Or they would like write down their grocery list and they would like bring
Yep.
it to the grocer and they would get all their things. Like there were so many things that these kids were doing when I was just letting them play. But if an administrator walked in or an instructional coach walked in, it looked like I was just doing nothing as an educator.
Right.
And I felt like those were the most impactful times for my students.
Yep.
And I also know that they enjoyed it because they would ask for it all the time. They're like, can we get these out again? And I'm just like, sure, I'll set a timer for 15 minutes. You guys get 15 minutes. And I just, whatever, if you're going to come in and yell at me for letting them play, then I guess do it.
Yeah. I have a podcast called Changemaker EDU, and I interviewed a gentleman named Peter Gray, and I believe he's a professor at Boston College, but he has a whole book he's just done years of research about the absence of play in our society and how that has actually created so many problems. Like, I remember him talking about like the radius that kids could play in like 1950 was like 5 miles from their house. And by 1970, it was like 3 miles. 1980, it was like 2 miles. And now it's like they don't even leave the house, right? And so think about education where play is not allowed to happen at all in the classroom for the most part. And so, yeah, he talks about how the problem with the education system is the lack of play, and he has all the research to back it up, and how much learning happens. Like you just said, your example, when you like learning happens by play and by kids actually figuring things out and just organically working it out. And so, yeah, 100% agree. And he's a great person to read research on because he's been doing the research for like 30 years. And I'm starting to see him on a lot more podcasts and like research papers and stuff because people are starting to listen to him now. He's retired, I think, maybe, or he teaches like one class. He's pretty like in his 70s. And so anyway, check him out if you're listening because I think you'll like what he has to say.
Yeah, what was his name? I'd love to look at his
Peter
research.
Gray. Peter Gray.
Gray.
And I'm not,
Okay.
I can't remember if it's Boston College or Boston University, but it's one of those two. But if you just look him up,
Okay.
you'll love what he writes about. And like I said, I feel like we know this intuitively, but he's got the actual academic research to back it up, which helps when people are like, you're crazy. And you can be like, well, this man has been doing research for 30 years and he's like a renowned professor. And so you can argue about his research, but it's not just me saying it. It's actually been proven by him.
Yeah, 100%. And there's actually, I just did some content on it, on the, basically that play helps kids to learn to read. And it looks at kids that were doing early academics really early on, like we're talking like preschool, pushed academics super hard,
Yeah.
didn't have as much play. And then like, how were they doing? They actually followed them up until 6th grade. And they were looking at, okay, we're going to do kids that were in more of a play-based type of schooling or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do one that was like super academic. And we're going to see by 6th grade who is actually doing better, because what we're told is, okay, you have to start academics this early. If you don't do this, then they're going to fall behind. And we
Yes.
have to, push and do more and more earlier. And so there's actually research, and it was a massive study. I can't remember how many kids they actually did this on. It was like thousands of kids.
Yeah.
And they actually looked at which one is going to do better. And the kids that got more play-based learning early on, and then, academics later, actually were more ahead in their academics and better socially, emotionally, like just their focus was better, their memory was better, all of these things that were literally, it was because they had more play when they were younger and they didn't get pushed academics. And the kids that were pushed academically, actually their gains, because at first they did have higher gains, but then it faded.
Right.
And then they were actually further behind. So it's, like when I saw that, I was like, well, I know that that's what it is, because I know how much play, obviously, like that's the serious learning for kids is play. And through play, they get to kind of, play with what they've learned. Like I said, like they were writing, they were doing math, and the kids will correct each other too. Like if they had a grocery list, and they would bring it to them, they're like, you didn't spell fruit correctly because you don't have UI in there. And we know that UI says, and so you need to go fix that.
Yes.
And like they would teach them, or like if they did their math wrong, they're like, actually, you owe me $10 and you need to go fix that problem, because, and so they like learn from each other and they take that experience, and it's actually more helpful than me as the adult telling them, hey, we're not doing that math problem correctly, because they take what their peers are saying into account way more than what the teacher is saying.
Yeah, and a lot of microschools are actually multi-age. As you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that when I talk to microschool leaders, they're like, oh, I don't even know what it would be like anymore to have like a group of first graders, a group of second graders. It's like the fifth graders kind of like, oh, you didn't spell fruit right, like, so they're interacting together. And then just kids learn by watching, and so they're watching the older kids, and they're like, little kids are obsessed with big kids, right? And so that's a real beautiful thing. And the other story I was going to tell you is that when I was launching my K-8 10 years ago, I had been in high schools and middle schools, so I was like, I don't know a lot. So of course I hired like great teachers and a principal that knew what she was doing, but I wanted to learn. And so I started asking around, like, who's your best kindergarten teacher, like at this school, or who's your favorite kindergarten teacher, to moms and stuff. And I'd be like, oh, talk to Miss Smith. And I talked to Miss Smith, and she's like, well, I'm retiring next year because this is absolute silliness. Like, I can't do this anymore. It's like shoving academics down their throat at like age 5. And she's like, when I started 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was all about like play and socialization. What's that thing? Like, everything I need to learn, I learned in kindergarten. They would tell me like, that's the opposite now. It's like everything you don't want to learn, you learn in kindergarten, because it's about like sitting still and all this academic stuff and all this, command and control, and make them comply. And they're 5. And so, and that was my son's experience in kindergarten. Like, his teacher didn't like him because he was too smart. She gave him the Smarty Pants award. That was her like little dig, like, Smarty Pants. That was her award at the end. I'm like, oh, thanks. Anyway, so, and she told him, you can't read this book because it's past kindergarten. And he's like, wait, what? I want to read a 3rd grade book. And she's like, no, that's past kindergarten. And when I asked her, she's like, no, that's not allowed. They can't go past kindergarten in their reading. I'm like, so you think he's too smart. You don't know how to deal with him. And now you're telling him to just not do anything that's actually beyond his level. It just was bizarre. And she just thought it was normal.
Well, and it is. I mean, a lot of teachers are that way. Like I for sure, I had kids that were reading at like 3rd, 4th grade levels. And sometimes they would choose a book that I'm like, they wanted to read it. They thought it was going to be interesting. And I'm like, okay, go for it. If you want to read, and I'm a 1st grade teacher, right? And I'm like, if you want to read it, I did tell them, like, you might not understand some of the things
like the
that
content.
Yeah, like the content you might not quite understand. So you might not find it interesting, but if you want to try it out, go ahead. And most of the time they would read like 3 pages and they're like, I don't want to read this. And I'm like, I figured you wouldn't want to, but
at least they got to try.
Do you? Yeah, they got to try.
Exactly.
And then they would go and pick a different book, and it was just whatever. But they, they were the ones that would. So that is like absolutely crazy to me. And I also, my nieces, they are very like, they love to move. And so when they first got to kindergarten, like, it was really hard for them to just sit still, and my sister would text me and she's like, So I asked the teacher if she would be allowed to just, maybe stand while she's doing her work. She told me she can't do that.
No.
Like, is that like a thing that like they can't? And I'm like, no, this
Like,
is a
I'm not
teacher
surprised.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a teacher thing. And I think that's ridiculous. And if she needs to stand to get her work done, who really cares? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
fine. Like, I always told my kids, I'm like, that's like, let them work how they wanted to work. And if they were getting their work done and they were doing it correctly, and like, I don't really care. Like, it doesn't bother
Yeah.
me. It's totally fine. But that is like the way that you are trained, is that they need
Yeah.
to, be sitting flat on their pockets, and they need to be
Yeah.
doing this when they're, it's like very structured. And like you said, kindergartners just, that's just not how it works for kindergartners, and they want to move. And so it's just like you're fighting constantly against their normal just nature of who they are and where they're at in development, and you're just fighting against it, which is so exhausting as the adult in the room, because one, it's not developmentally appropriate. Two, there's really not much you can do about it because you have so many kids. Like, it's just, there's so much that's
Yep. Exactly.
going on. And I do love what you said about the micro schools and allowing for the different ages, because
Yes.
I think that we should not be having schools framed around, this is your age, so you have to be around this age of kids. Like, I think it needs to be more skill based, obviously, and like, okay, this is the skill we're working on with you in reading, writing, and math, and then allowing them to kind of explore their interests, which is what I know a micro schools really focus on, right?
Yeah.
But they also have the different ages, and like you said, like, if you have a fifth grader teaching a first grader, and they're like, hey, like, they are so much more engaged. And we
Yep.
kind of try to do this in the public schools. We're like, oh, you have a sixth grade buddy. They
Right.
get to come
Right.
and read with you. But it's a very like,
It's like 20 minutes
it's,
a week, if that. Yeah.
yeah, if that. And, the kids love it,
Oh,
but
yeah.
there's really not much going on when you have a micro school where they're there for, maybe an hour, maybe more than that. I don't know exactly how your micro schools work, but it kind of depends, I guess, on how you as the adult kind of frame it. But they are getting so much more time to do that and interact with these kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I remember telling families, because we did a lot of collaborative group work in my middle and high schools, that they'd be like, oh, my kid seems like he's always teaching another kid. Like, that doesn't seem like he's doing very well. And I was like, well, actually, the deepest level of understanding of any concept is when you teach it to someone else. So if your kid's teaching someone else, that means that they're going to get the content better than, I was a history teacher. I was like, they're going to get the content better than anyone else. So I wouldn't worry about that. That's just like and then the other really funny thing with grade levels that I didn't realize until my kids were in elementary school is that they're so segmented, they don't know each other if they're in a different grade. Even in our small charter school, because we started with multi-grade, and then all the compliance and issues, like the district authorizer wouldn't let us do it, so we just switched. But then I noticed how, like, the kids would be like, oh, I'm in second grade, I don't talk to a first grader. And even my kids now in middle school, they're like, oh, I don't talk to a seventh grader, I'm in sixth grade. Like, it's like, wait, you can't talk to somebody because you've been segmented by an adult, and now you don't even think that's okay. So it's just, it's bizarre what we create. We create these like like you said, these non-organic places where all of a sudden we're telling them you only talk to sixth graders. And we don't tell them that, but that's a system we've created. And so they think it's weird to talk to someone who's literally 6 months older than them. Like, how is that normal?
Yeah, it honestly is so weird. And that is really the case. Or like, the sixth graders think they're all like, if you are in an elementary school where sixth graders are still in
The
elementary,
top.
which,
Yeah.
oof, I don't think that should be a thing. Like, people don't realize how much happens from fifth to sixth grade and the
right.
difference in their development and just, where they're at in their life. And it's like,
Yeah.
sixth graders should not be in elementary schools. But anyways, that's beside the
Right,
point.
right.
But the sixth graders think that they're like these top big dogs, and they, and they're like, I'm so much cooler than you because I'm a sixth grader and you're a fifth grader.
Right.
And I'm like, no, like, you guys are, you can commingle and talk to each other. You're not
Yeah.
that far off in age, a lot of these kids, right? Because you have super young kids in sixth grade and super old kids in fifth grade that are on the
Yeah.
line. And I'm like,
Exactly.
you guys aren't that much older than each other. But it is this
Exactly.
weird thing that they pick up on. Even if we don't say it, they pick up on it. And that's now like what they think is the norm. And it's just
Yeah.
not. And they would benefit, like you said, the highest level of learning is being able to teach somebody else that skill.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think it's crazy. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about skills and, the highest level of learning and all of these things,
Yeah.
we obviously have standardized testing in our
Mm-hmm.
system. And how do you think, or what role does this standardized testing play in the current dysfunction? And do you, I know that the micro schools are going to be very different. Do you guys rethink assessments? Do you have to do certain assessments based on your state? How does that work?
Yeah, all great questions. So first of all, it depends on how you structure your microschool in terms of whether it's required. So and it depends on the state. So if you decide to do a private school, then you have to follow certain regulations and guidelines by the State Department of Education. And so, for example, I can't remember, I'm just going to say, let's say like Pennsylvania, I think you have to take one or two like norm reference standardized tests to show that you're actually like learning something. If you do a homeschool learning center, then you typically don't have to do any kind of standardized test. But I feel like standardized tests I feel like in kind of this type of conversation, they become the villain. Like, oh my God, standardized test, da, 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 and it becomes this whole situation. Because the system has taken it to a whole nother level and the No Child Left Behind and all the craziness. That's the other thing when I talk to these amazing teachers that were retiring 10 years ago, they're like, this standardized testing stuff is just ridiculously out of hand. So if you're talking about testing kids, 7 times a year and taking 2 weeks off of school just to test kids, like that's insanity. However, I do think it's important to use an actual norm reference validated assessment to show your families and yourself and your children, the children in the school, that you're actually learning something. Because that is a risk with micro schools that are unregulated, is that you're going to have people actually doing damage to children because they're not doing anything and they're not teaching them anything, and they're running around and playing in the in the nature all day. So I think there's a balance, is guess what I'm saying. So like what I recommend is like maybe do like a NWEA map test once a year, just to be able to show the public, to show your families, to show the kids like, oh wow, like you're really struggling in reading. We probably should get our acts together at this micro school and ensure that we're working with you in a different way, or whatever it may be, or like you're not doing well in science, whatever it may be. So I think that it's important to have some sort of validated assessment that isn't biased by a teacher. However, I think that should maybe happen like once a year, once every 2 years, and depending on the age of the child and all that kind of stuff, because it's just gotten way out of hand. But I do think there's progressive education circles that throw the baby, what's it called, throw out the baby with the bathwater, and they're just like, no, standardized test. And then like here in the state of California, now there's, a report card about whether a school is successful. And a lot of it's self-reported. So I'm like, okay, so the terrible school down the street where the kids aren't learning anything, they just get to give themselves a green because their climate is great. But like, are the kids actually learning anything, right? And so I think we've gone way too far away from like any kind of valid assessments that actually prove that the teacher's not just like, oh, I feel sorry for this kid, so I'm going to give him a good grade. I'm going to say they learned. And then I think if you're talking about the most vulnerable populations, kids that don't have educated parents or low-income kids or whatever it may be, they're the ones that need to have some sort of validated assessment the most, because they're the ones that have to make up the most, you have to make up the most gaps with them. So in our micro schools, our vision is to have a very reasonable standardized testing, probably once a year at the end of the year, or maybe one in September, one in June, just to give us data so that we can really check ourselves against what's going on and make sure we're providing the best education for the kids.
Yeah, no, I like what you said as far as, teachers do like to just like standardized testing sucks. Let's just 100% get rid of it. And in a way, I kind of get it because like, okay, so for example, I didn't have to do anything crazy like fourth grade had to do. As a first grade teacher, in Utah, we had to do something called the Dibbles test, and they had math and reading. They didn't have anything for writing, which I thought was kind of interesting. But anyways, and so that was like the state test that we had to do, and we had to test them. Well, we had to progress monitor them, and our district was like, you must progress monitor them. I think it was like, I want to say once a month or something like that. Okay. And we had to do it ourselves, which was so hard. And we had like really no one to watch our kids while we were doing it. So we had to figure out how to do that. And like, it was just anyways. And like, how accurate is that testing when the kids are distracted? Cause you're, right. Anyways. And it was like, don't talk to me. You are not allowed to talk to me unless there was like blood gushing everywhere. Like, don't come to me. But anyways, so we had to do those assessments. And personally, as an educator, really told me not much. And I like, we didn't even like, we put it on our report cards, which report cards is another thing, but like we
Right.
put it on our report cards, but I didn't use that data to actually inform what I was going to help these kids with, because
Yeah. So it's a waste
it
of time
didn't,
then. Yeah.
yeah, it was like kind of a waste of time for me. I mean, when they were reading passages, that kind of helped me to know, like, okay, like kind of where they're at in reading these passages, but they're super complex. So for me, it was also like, well, this is more complex than what we've even learned in first grade yet.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to even expect. And then so then they were like scoring not very high on it, but I was like, but I don't really care because we haven't learned this yet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was like kind of pointless for me. And so the assessments that I did was like based on skills and like, okay, what phonetic pattern do we need to learn? Like, you know,
Right.
can you write a sentence? Is your spelling at the developmentally appropriate level that you are at? Like, you know, are you using the patterns that we've learned? Like,
Yep.
okay, can we read a passage with the phonetic patterns we've learned? Like, so many other things that I would test them
Exactly.
on. And it wasn't even like a formal test that I would really give
Exactly.
them. It was
Yes.
informal. And I was like, I knew where my kids were at, which is crazy because I had like
That's amazing.
23, 24 of them. And I just like
Right.
knew, I was like, oh, you know, Johnny, he needs, you know, to
Mm-hmm.
work
Mm-hmm.
on these phonetic patterns. And I just kind of knew. And like, as you know, a team with my team teachers, like that's how we assessed our kids. And that's actually what we provided our parents through parent teacher
That's
conference,
great.
was very
Yeah.
skill based. And we were like, we're required to hand you this report card that literally means nothing to us, that I had to
Right.
spend 3 hours on. But
Yes.
I'm required to give this to you, and I'm going to give it to you. And this is their state test. But I just want to show you like where your child is at, where they're going, and what we're
Yep.
going to be working on next. And it looks like they're super far behind, but we're not going to like really put a bunch of pressure on that. We're going to look at what they've succeeded in and then where they're
Right.
going and like how you can help them. And so I think, you know, that was one thing that we just as team teachers were like, okay, our report cards are stupid and it doesn't tell us anything. Parents end up
Right.
more confused. It also
Yeah.
had like
Exactly.
a part of their grade was like attendance and homework and like all these other things that really don't tell you much about.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
obviously
Excellent.
that's
Yeah.
like responsibility. Like, okay,
Right.
are you
Right.
responsible?
Yes.
Can you come to school on time? And a lot of the time that's not even their fault. So it's
Exactly.
like, I'm like, okay, this report card is stupid, but let's show you really where they're at and what they need to do. And so I think, you know, as teachers, we get frustrated with that testing only because we
Yes.
know what it
Yes.
looks like, and some of it's pointless to us. And so we're
Yes.
like, okay, this doesn't even really show what like these kids really know. And if we were to, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
There is just
I know
really
exactly what you're
strange.
saying.
Yeah, and then like you said, takes 2 weeks to do this test. Like I
That's
remember
silly.
even with the Dibbles testing, like we had to block out like a week just for first graders to get
Yeah.
it
It's
all
crazy.
done. And so
Yeah.
we were, you know, just giving them a reading test that had all these different requirements that they had to do. And then we had to give them math tests that were, you know, anyways, it was just like, okay, a week for first graders of testing. By the end of that week, like they are so done.
Yeah, and you wonder why they don't like school, right? And they're by second or third grade, like most of the research has shown, like they're not as curious, they don't like school anymore. It's like it's starting to happen because we're just putting them through all this testing stuff. But I will say, just to clarify that, yeah, I agree with you 100%, and I think that it's a portfolio of assessments. So like the best teachers, like sounds like you really knew. I always tell people, if I walk into a classroom, I want to ask the teacher, like, what does each kid need? And if you can tell me that, then I'm feeling good already about you as a teacher. Like, that kid needs this, that kid needs that. Like, you know your kids really well. And then, but I think with that portfolio of assessments, you know, it's like some of them are, it's like straight up Montessori observations and it's like your interpretation. And some of them are, you know, different assessments that you created. Some of them are like curriculum assessments that come with the curriculum. So there's all these different ways to assess whether the kids are learning. I would just advocate for, you know, it's called a validated assessment, which really it's validating what you know as a teacher. And every once in a while, you're gonna be like, whoa, I was off with that one kid. Like I thought they were here, but they were there. So so it's just another way. But I agree in like I have a friend who has a microschool in South Dakota, and she's like, we're never doing standardized tests here because she's out in the nature and like she's just like, I don't even want to put my kids through that. And I respect that too. I just think that it's more of a nuanced argument than like just get rid of all the standardized tests because, like I said, in unregulated space like microschools, you can have schools where the kids aren't learning anything and no one's going to know, including the parents, and that's a problem.
100%. And like I said, there are certain things that need to be tested. Like, when you're teaching a child to read, it is actually pretty complex, and we have a phonetic system that we have
Yeah.
to, abide by. Even math, right? It's a progressive thing that we're learning, and so things build on top of each other. And so if you know, okay, like, where do we have to start in this progression, and then you can have assessments that really are just super quick. I mean, my assessments that I created, like, we would have the reading, writing, and spelling done in literally, like, it was like 2 minutes. Like, it was so fast. And then it was like this quick boom, boom, boom. Okay, I know where you're at. Okay, this is where we're going. And so I think that is important. Like you said, you have to have something to kind of show, like, where, because you might be like, oh, this kid is like really killing it on their reading. And then you
Yes.
go to do spelling and you're like, oh, okay, you are really good at maybe memorizing words, but you don't actually
Right.
know how our phonetic
Yes.
patterns work. And if you don't know how to, like, if you don't know that, you're going to struggle in spelling. And that's just a fact, right? Like, if your kid's a good reader, it does not mean that they're automatically a good speller. And a lot of people have that misconception of, like, oh, because they can read really well, they should be able to spell well. And then they get confused as to why their kid can't spell. And it's like, well, have
Right.
you specifically taught them these patterns? And if you haven't, then they're probably going to struggle. So I do think, like you said, like, having some of those assessments with certain things, you're going to be better off, because you're going to find those little holes that you might not notice informally when you
Yeah.
do it formally.
Yeah. And the great news is, as a microschool founder, 80% of microschools are privately funded through tuition and education savings accounts and vouchers, meaning that the owner of the microschool, other than the regulations that were, like we talked about, from the state, whether you're a homeschool learning center or a private school, other than those regulations, you have the choice to do what you think is best for the kids. And if you're in a
Mm-hmm.
small microschool, if you're doing something that's not good for the kids, let me tell you something, the parents will find out and they will leave.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
the biggest accountability is to the actual children and their families, which is the way it should be. And so if you are
100%.
philosophically opposed to standardized tests, and you explain that to your families and you explain that to the kids, whatever age they are, and then you say,
Mm-hmm.
like, here's our robust assessment system. And I feel very confident that this is telling you where your kid's at, but I don't want to do a standardized test. That's great. Or you could be
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I was more, I spent a lot of time in traditional schools, and I want to choose a standardized assessment that's once a year that I think is really valid and it's really going to help you. And we're going to explain it to you, and we're going to work together. We're going to look at it with a picture of, like, all the different assessments that the kids are taking, throughout the teacher created ones, this and that. We're going to look at all of them together, and we're going to decide what we think as a group, the parent, the kid, and the teacher. What do we think he or she needs? That's great, right? And you get to decide. No one's going to tell you, well, some district superintendent who's, some curriculum company decided you have to do this, or you have to do the star of this, or fill in the blank. And now you're all just
Mm-hmm.
sitting there having to do it, and the parents don't understand it. Look what happens. Then you have a team of teachers that are really smart and, like, we're not doing any of this, and we're just going to kind of hand it to the parents because we're supposed to. So nobody cares about it. It's just a waste of time.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what's really cool, like you said, that is not in the education system. Like, I actually found it very interesting. I was doing research back when Utah was wanting to do create ESAs and do grants
Yeah.
and, like, all kinds of stuff for school choice. And they were super big in school choice. And
Yeah.
I remember, this is actually really funny, but I remember my principal was very upset about this. And basically every teacher was upset about this because they were saying that it was going to take funds from the public education system and put it elsewhere. And my first thought was, well, if you're worried about people leaving your school, so you're not going to get the funding for that pupil because they're taking the money elsewhere, you should not be freaking out that, like, oh my gosh, they're evil. You should be looking inside and saying, okay, like, why do people not want to be in my school?
Right.
Like you said, with
Right.
micro schools, parents will just leave. Even with private schools, right? Like, you're paying
Yep.
that tuition, and so
Exactly.
you're like, okay, my child is not thriving here. I don't want to pay you money anymore. But unfortunately, in the way that it works right now is, you don't really have that choice. Like, schools are funded by property tax, and I can't remember all the other taxes, but one big one is obviously property tax, right? That's
Yeah.
how they fund these schools, and you can't, like, opt out of that. Like, that's money that you just have to give to the public schools, and you don't
Yep.
have a choice. And some people may argue, like, well, we need an educated society, and so you
Yeah.
should be doing your part and paying for the tax. And I do think we do need an educated society, but I think ultimately what's going to make education better is if parents parents have the choice and they can spend the funds in the way that they see fit for their kid, because then that's going to create the competition. So it kind of creates that capitalism type view on it that I think is kind of missing there, because if a school sucks, unfortunately, from the research I've done, at least in Utah, is if the school sucks and it's getting bad grades, they can literally just change it and turn it into a charter and be like, all is well. And they don't get shut down. I know I'm not the only mom who wants to be present with her kids, but sometimes I have no idea what to actually do with them. Once my daughter becomes a toddler, I already know I'll want more than just screen-free time. I'll want connection, learning, and purposeful play. But coming up with those ideas on my own every day, that sounds exhausting. That's why I love what Learning with Kelsey offers. These boxes are full of hands-on, play-based activities designed to help you connect, teach, and enjoy your child, all without prep. Whether it's fine motor skills, letters, numbers, or sensory play, there's something for every age and stage. So if you're like me, wanting to make learning meaningful at home, use my link and get 15% off your first box. You can be the teacher, guide, and safe place for your child's needs, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Reading and writing are the cornerstones of your child's education. Without the right foundation, they can struggle, but with the right tools, they can soar. That's where the 5 Foundations of Reading course comes in. This course is designed to teach parents how to help their children master phonological awareness, which is the essential first step in literacy, phonics skills like decoding spelling patterns for fluent reading and writing, segmenting and blending, which are key strategies for becoming a confident reader, and orthographic mapping so that your child can learn spelling patterns and use them effectively. Last, you'll learn about high-frequency words, which are essential for fluency in everyday reading. You'll also learn the most effective ways to teach these skills, making learning time productive and enjoyable for both you and your child. Whether your child is ahead or catching up, this course equips you to support their journey to literacy success. Start today by visiting k3homeschoolfoundations.com or check out the link down below. And so I think that is ridiculous. And I think that if you are failing a certain amount of years, you shouldn't just be turned into a charter. You should legitimately be shut down. And I don't know, or something else has to happen, because they change it to a charter. They put this brand new name on it and they're like, oh, we're doing this beautiful new thing. And it's like literally the same thing except for a different name. So I think that doing what you're doing and creating this new system that people can opt into instead of the old system is actually going to change the education system. And it might be a rocky road in the beginning because, they're losing funding, which honestly, I feel like the funding, don't even get me started on funding in education and public schools and the money and how it's spent. I feel like if teachers were the ones that were handling the budget, we might also be somewhere because you have, it's like this weird trickle down thing. It's like you get money from the federal government. If you're a Title I school, you have the state funding, and like they're literally funneling it through all of these different departments. It gets to the superintendent, then the superintendent funnels it down to the principal, and then the principal allocates where it goes. And it's like, guys, like the teachers at that school know exactly what they need. And for the most part, like, we're not going to ask for much. Like I got in trouble for printing too much one time because you had to put in a code. And so they knew how much I was printing. And they're like, hey, we need to tell all the teachers that we're all printing too much and we don't have the funds for that. And I'm like, I'm trying to do my job. I don't just willy-nilly press print because I feel like it's fun.
Yeah, I think your opinion on education savings accounts, because this is a very controversial one. So first of all, I want to say it's something like 27 states now have some version of like a tax credit, or I actually think with the tax credit it's more like 40 states. But if you're looking at just education savings accounts, it's probably more like, it's more than half. And the majority of Americans, I think it's around 60%, would agree that the money should follow the kid, right? So it's like, we're paying taxes, we're getting a certain allocation for our kid to go to this school. If we decide this school is not working for our child, especially if you're like a special education student, you're like, you definitely should be able to take the $30,000 or whatever it is that the school's getting to not even do a good job with your special education student to an actual school that might do a good job. So most of them start with special education, right? The education savings accounts legislation, and then they move into more universal, like everyone can get it. But I think your opinion and like the way you're thinking about it is the way most people are thinking about it. And I think I think that's the sea change that's happening. And I think it's harder for certain people based on their political beliefs around, like you said, around the dissolving public education system. But to your point, it's like, I've been doing this for 25 years, and it's been around forever and nothing's really changing. Like I said, it's only gotten worse. And so at some point we just have to kind of make some bold choices here and start to create some change. And so the other really interesting story I always tell is you look at the people that are making the biggest argument against like, don't leave public education or don't have your kids, don't, you should support public education. But once they have a child, they either go to the best private school, the best charter school, they homeschool, like they don't make that choice. So everyone's high and mighty about it until it's their own child. And it's like, okay, so you're okay with someone else's child being in a failing school because you believe in the system of public education. But the moment it comes down to your child not being able to read or getting bullied or having an abusive teacher or whatever it may be at the school, you are okay with it. So I just think it's kind of a hypocritical argument that people don't follow with their own children. So we should be creating a system that allows for every family to decide what's best for their child. And the public tax dollars are not entitled. You're not entitled to go to a certain institution because you've been there for 200 years. It should go to what's best for the actual child, and the parent should have the choice to make that choice, because we don't trust parents. We treat them like they don't know anything and they don't understand anything. And as a parent myself, no one on this planet knows my kids better than I do other than themselves. Nobody, even the best teacher, even though I believe I was a great teacher, in my high school, we would do a one-to-one, like an actual conference 3 times a year, which they don't do in high schools because it's like, why don't you do that? This is a really important 4 years. So we'd start in 9th grade and be like, what are your goals? And in the middle of 9th grade, be like, wow, you got all Fs. I don't think you're going to get to college. They end up, we'd do that, and we'd kind of, or like, oh, you got all As. Maybe you should up your goal. But we would actually meet with the kids, and we would trust the parents to tell us like the first question I asked is like, tell me about your kid. And we love to tell, oh, he's always been like this. Since he was born, he's been shy. He's always been outgoing. And you're like, wow, I learned so much about your kid because I asked. And so that's, the parents should have the choice about where their kid should go. We should stop treating them like they're a bunch of idiots, because we actually know what's best for our children.
100%. And that's what drives me, like, honestly, I'm like, this has to be bots or something. Like, I don't know, because when I bring up this point of parents know their kids best and they are ultimately going to want what is best for their child. Yeah. I mean, yes, you may have outliers
There's
out
exceptions.
there where
exactly.
There's exceptions. There's always exceptions everywhere.
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking about the exceptions. Okay. I'm talking about the majority of parents are going to care about their child. They want their child to succeed. They want to challenge them. And I'll hear these things where they're like, oh, the parents won't even challenge their child. They're going to just make them, they're just going to make them dumb or something. And I'm like, no, like, your child. Like, I never would tell as an educator, like, oh, I know your child better than you do. Like, no, you know that child at a very intimate level that I don't know that child. Yes, I spend a lot of time with them, but it's your child. Like, if you, whatever it is that you know about them is something that I don't know. And so I don't know, that argument, I'm like, this has to be some sort of bot or something. I don't know. Like, I'm like, I don't get it. Like you said, you must not have children. And even before I had kids, like I'm a new mom, and like, I know what is best for my child. And, I get anxiety when other people are like holding her and they're like trying to comfort her in a certain way. And I'm like, listen, just give her back to me. Like, I know what she needs. It's kind of that, like, that internal knowing that you just know them, and their personality and what they like and what they want and what they need and all of these things that another person just can't know. And I like you said, I think it's hypocritical. I think a lot of these people don't have children, honestly. Or they're, I don't know, educators that don't want to. I think educators have a problem also with seeing that they are maybe in a system that's not doing what's right for the kids, and they don't want to, like, I guess, I don't know, see that, or
well, it's hard, right? Because you're basically quote unquote attacking their whole entire livelihood.
Exactly. And so it's kind of like they just can't even believe it. And I wish that there were more educators. And I know there are some that are like, oh yeah, I totally understand that this is like completely messed up, but I do kind of love my job, and I need my job, and I'm just going to keep doing it. And like, I totally get all of those aspects as well. But I do want to kind of go into Changemaker, which is your, I don't know, what would you call it? Like a foundation, a company, like kind of explain what Changemaker is.
Yeah, I always explain it as like an incubator that helps you get your microschool open, and a network that keeps it successful and sustainable forever. So what that means is like there's some organizations out there that are actually helping you get your Microsoft off the ground, and they stay with you for a few years, and then they kind of say like go for it, you know. And then there's other ones where you're like taking the actual box. Well, I'll just give the examples. There's like the Kipod that's more like, hey, we're there to help you get off the ground. We stay with you for 3 years, and then you know, we're done after that unless you want us. But their model is like just move on after 3 years. Then there's like Acton Academy, which gives you the whole entire box, and now there's other ones that are kind of replicating that, copying both of those, where like they have a model and they're literally giving you a school in a box. So it's like a franchise. We're neither of those because we really believe that, I'm sure this is not going to surprise anyone from our conversation, but I really believe that people like the educator or the parent that's starting it, it could be an educator or a parent, is actually like they should have the autonomy to decide what's best for the children in their community, which is most of the time, like we talked about, their own children in the school. And so we are the incubator that helps you get off the ground. So we train you, we give you all the support. We have a cohort of 15 microschool founders that are launching. We do a whole year-long program. We do virtual trainings. We do our 3-hour cohort sessions where we laugh, cry, meditate, do all the things, because launching a new thing is really hard. And then we give you the very specific workshops like, well, how do you get your insurance? How do you build your budget? How do you find your location? Like all those things. We do 2 hours, 2 times a week of coaching. So like hands-on, like this intimate conversations, like what's blocking you? How can we help you? What's your vision for your school? So it's like a really hands-on approach, a really in-depth community and support for you as an individual. And then once you open, then we're there to be with you every step of the way to ensure that you are sustainable, because some micro schools will open and then like the person opening it will be like, this is really hard because I have to like teach every day and deal with kids. It's like, yeah, that's what you have to do. And so then they're like, we're done. I just wanted to add a few kids, to my 2 kids, and now this is too hard. Or there's an issue with like, they don't want to charge people a lot of money, and then they don't have a budget model that works past year 3. So we really believe that we want to have, our vision is to have 100 Changemaker microschools in the next decade, all different types, like affluent Chicago, low income Phoenix, like wherever it may be, everything in between. So we can say like, look, this model of self-directed learning, project-based learning, empowered educators, autonomous parents, and kids that actually are told that they can do whatever they want, and like structured and built that way, that we can really change the education system. So we have proof points across the whole entire country. So that's our program, and we basically recruit. It's a selective process. We recruit about 15 founders every year, and we are looking for people that, like yourself, like this kind of conversation, that are really values aligned around shifting the whole entire paradigm and creating a new system where people on the ground actually have the power. So the anti-command and control system, the people on the ground, the moms, the dads, the educators, and the actual children actually have power on the ground to do what they think is best for their lives and their children, so that ultimately we can actually shift a lot of these problems that we're seeing in the education system.
I love that. And I think it's so important, like you've kind of mentioned throughout, like I think this model is the most important for special education kids because,
Yes.
and even kids that are, of like low socioeconomic status, because like you said, unfortunately the case is that they're usually the ones that are further behind and they need the more one-on-one attention. They need, they have a lot more needs that you need to attend to make sure that they succeed. And unfortunately, I've been in 2 different districts, and I can say that it's just the same of the same. And the special education stuff is not that great. And like you said, they do not push these kids. Like I've had special education kids in my class, and I have the exact same expectation of them as far as like how we are going to behave and how we are going to, like, all of the things, obviously, even like same expectation of, okay, it's going to be at your level, but I have the same expectation of you as these other kids, because unfortunately they don't get that. Like they are like treated like they aren't capable, and it makes me really sad. But when you actually treat them like you are capable, you can do this. Maybe you are behind in whatever the school system deems as behind, but like you can do this. You are capable. And I think that is one thing that is super missing in our school, and even like you said, like your son got this like smarty pants and, she wasn't pushing him. And it's like, we literally put these kids in this box
Mm-hmm.
that they shouldn't be put in to begin with. And we need to make sure that we are challenging these kids and that we are setting these high expectations, because they can meet them if you are there to support them and you
Yep.
believe in them. Because if you believe in them, they start to believe in themselves. And then
Yep.
it's like this crazy thing happens that's, they start to succeed and they start to progress, and they believe that they really can do this and that there's not something wrong with them. Because as much as
Yep.
they're like, oh, you're special, and like it really does put
Mm-hmm.
in their mind that something is wrong with them. And it isn't. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, you might need more help here and this child doesn't, and that's okay. So I love what you're saying with that, and I really hope that like you can. I love that your mission is to have it in every area that you can, because it will benefit these kids that truly truly need it and need that support. So really quickly, I just want to do like two little rapid fire
Yeah.
questions here.
Sure.
What would you say to parents who want something different for their kids but they feel trapped in the system?
Yes, I love that question. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself as a parent. Believe in your intuition, your knowing about your child, like you were talking about. Believe that you know what's best for them, and stay open to that. Like if you really believe in yourself, and then just go and look for it. Like there's more and more models coming with homeschool learning centers, homeschool co-ops, like because people are like, I can't homeschool, I have to work, or I can't be with my kid all day. Like I'll go crazy. We get it. So I feel like you have to kind of figure out what's best for you and your family. But there's options out there. There's even companies now, I think, where you can like pay somebody to go. And some woman reached out to me in Chicago. It's like, my job is just to help people find a school. I'm like, there's a job for that now. So there's actual like companies and consultants that will just be like, let's find the exact perfect school for your child. So there's definitely more of this happening. And so, yeah, but the main thing I have for parents is like, believe in yourself and trust yourself. Like, so my family is three generations of severely dyslexic. My dad, my brother, and my nephew, right? All boys, all dyslexic, all totally failed by the school system at different levels and different ages, right? Different generations. And like so I talked with one of my friends the other day who has a kid with special needs in a school district. And she's like in kindergarten or first grade, her daughter. And I'm like, trust yourself. Trust yourself. You know what's best for your child. And then don't let those quote unquote experts that think they know your kid better than you tell you that she shouldn't be doing this, she shouldn't be doing that. Just trust yourself. So if you're a family that's looking for something different, like trust your gut and go find the exact best option for them.
I love that. Like you said, like we've talked about, parents know best, and you have to go with your gut feeling sometimes, and that gut feeling may really do something for your child in the education realm. Okay,
Yep.
so one more question. If you could change just one thing about the education system today, what would it be?
It's what I was saying before about changing the operating system. And I'll tell a story to kind of share it. So to exemplify it. So I did some consulting with a big Montessori network. Like they had all these Montessori schools. And what was really like incongruous, like almost cognitive dissonance for me is that you go into these Montessori classrooms where the kids are actually self-directing and they're like making choices and they have all this agency. And then I would go walk into the principal's office because I was consulting and coaching with the principal and the superintendent, and she would tell me, I have no power as a principal, and then the teachers have no power. And so you're using a command and control operating system for the adults, yet you have a Montessori school that's telling all the kids that they get to be in charge. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
like literally cognitive dissonance. It's like you're talking out of two sides of your mouth. And so
Mm-hmm.
my number one thing that I would change, this is why I'm so excited about microschools, is you can actually change the operating system of how the school's operated. No more 40 student classrooms or 25 or whatever. No more like school board, school, superintendent, principal, assistant principal. Like you said, then it gets to the teacher. The teacher has no power. Yes, the teacher should be deciding budgets. That's so basic. We did that in my charter school. And basically change the operating system so you're no longer using this outdated model that was built in 1880 that it's not working at all. It hasn't worked, and it's really not working in 2025.
100%. And I love that. And like you said, it is the operating system, and it's a big system, and it's really hard to make change. And I feel like the only way personally to make change is to create something different like what you're doing. And I love that your program is, you're staying with these people that are creating micro schools. You have that community to help them because, like you said, it is hard. Like, it's not
That's
something
hard.
easy to figure out all of the, budgeting and the, how do I help these kids if I'm not sure how to help them or whatever. Just having that support system is going to be so helpful. So I love that yours is different in that way. So if anybody is interested in maybe creating their own micro school in their community, where can they go to find you?
Yeah, so just go to changemakereducation.com, all one word, Changemaker Education, and you can go on there and you can reach out to me directly, or you could apply to be a microschool founder. It's all right there on the website.
Perfect. And I will also put the link down below. And then do you have like any social media or anything that you would want people to follow you on, or you just have your website?
The website, and then Changemaker EDU is our Instagram handle, and then also we're really active on LinkedIn, which is also Changemaker Education or Changemaker EDU, so you can find us there too.
Okay, perfect. Well, I have had such a joy just talking to you, and I love that there are other people out there like you that are creating alternatives for parents so that if they are feeling stuck in a system, they have other options, or they at least know that there are other options, and then they can make the decision that's going to fit, best for their needs. But other than that, yeah, I hope that you continue on with what you're doing and that you find ultra success, because I think it's super important in our education system today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an update. Literacy is the foundation of learning, and every child deserves the tools to succeed. If you're ready to take the next step in your child's education, check out my website at k3homeschoolfoundations.com for resources, curriculum, and support to make literacy simple and effective.